So I did put one of the slides up. This is the presentation that I had shared with the trustees a few months ago and the community, really going back to why we started this policy. And I think the slide really spoke to the consistency between a student who can be enrolled in a course and have 3 different teachers and have very significant different course averages. So I did speak to all the trustees in the community, and I actually had shared an example, and I tried to run through an example of the 3 different students if we looked at them from a perspective of having 3 different teachers receiving the same exam scores, but what will happen to their final average in each of their classes depending on the teacher that they had based on the teacher's grading policy. And so that is really where we started from a place of equity. It was very imbalanced between teacher to teacher, and it was actually impacting final averages for students depending on the teacher that they had.
Right. If you don't mind, if I can interject
Sure.
a little bit. So you guys did an excellent job. I know you worked very hard with this to, create some type of consistency. And I think that was the main point with this whole thing. And I think create fairness across the board. And I think you did a wonderful job at that. The concerns that I'm hearing, and I just want to, address these concerns from the community is the perception that this is a test-heavy grading policy. It says, was it 50% summative and 30% formative? And I think that's where the community is a little concerned for those kids that aren't good test takers and stuff like that. So I think we also need to outline, what summative and formative is for the community, just kind of dispel some of those concerns a little bit as well.
Sure, and again, that could depend on the course itself, right? So we actually gave an example within our policy of what could constitute a summative assessment. Summative assessments could be project-based, right, depending on the course. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a pencil and paper test. That may be appropriate in some classes, but not appropriate in other classes. A summative assessment could be an essay that a student is writing. It could be a presentation that a child is given. So we gave examples of summative assessments within the policy, but it also said but not limited to, right? And our policy speaks to the fact that teachers can collaborate with their directors to say, would you consider this summative or, more of an informative assessment?
Because I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I mean, one of the things that came out was labs, right? So in science clubs, labs are very important. So we heard from our science teachers that, hey, this needs to be more of a summative, or our labs are very hands-on projects. So that may be a summative assessment for them in a science class versus a test.
As classwork as well can be considered
Correct.
in the same way. Because I think what some parents are hearing, what I've heard from them is that they're concerned that it's 50% tests, 30% quizzes, which makes 80% testing, and that's a concern, and I understand the concerns if that's a way somebody decides to go. So that's just wondering if we have some type of
Sure. Obviously, I don't think I think that was happening already.
Yeah.
With our classroom teachers, right? I do think by the nature, I think the purpose of this policy was to bring consistency and to make sure that no one test, whether it be a project-based, a presentation, or an essay, was counting so much that it actually impacted a child's exam average. If you're giving an assessment and within a marking quarter you were only having 3 assessments, those 3 assessments weighed very heavily versus another classroom teacher that gave maybe 8 different types of assessments where kids could actually prove mastery multiple times, right? So I think the policy was actually trying to not do that, to say, hey, no one test should be counting more than 20%. You have to be regularly assessing students. How you assess them really depends on the course that you're teaching.
but we have nothing to quantify how many it is, how large a sample size is going to be. So a teacher, what I'm saying is a teacher has the ability, though, to kind of put a
Design
minimal
their
amount
own
of
tests.
assessments on there. And
Yep.
I think that's my concern. I think that's some of the other people's concern that, based on that there is going to be, there can be possibly a larging, just
There
a
could be
test-heavy-
more
test-heavy
tests
curriculum,
right.
yeah,
And the one
with
thing I
smaller
want
samples.
right, I think the one thing I will point out is we actually changed something to offset that. If you read in the letter that I sent to the community, we actually changed when we were assessing kids within a marking quarter. So oftentimes our A day, B day classes run full year. Within the first marking quarter, they're only really seeing their students for 5 weeks rather than 10, and immediately we're trying to say give them a test and give them a grade. We're actually saying no, if you have an A day, B day class and it runs all year, we're only assessing you twice, the second quarter and the fourth quarter. So we're not overly testing students, and we're spreading it out over 10 weeks rather than over 5 weeks. So the policy actually addresses that. It gives those teachers more time rather than trying to cram in so many different assessments within a shorter period of time, if that makes sense.
It does.
I'm going to just jump on Fran here. I think the problem lies in a misconception of
That's what I'm
what
saying, too.
formative and summative means. Because I'm getting, we're moving away from standardized tests, but now we're making, all of our classes be high-stakes testing. And we're trying to set up our IEP and 504 special ed kids to fail. And I sat on this committee for 2 years, and I'm trying to wrangle misconceptions. I think maybe what Dr. Jones just came around and said is maybe we need to do just a breakdown. This is what this is. This is formative. This is summative. They got the letters. They saw the letters. I mean, I was getting comments from kids that have high schoolers who have had 2 that went through the school already, through the system, and they're like, this is crazy. And they're a special ed teacher in another district. So I just think it went a little bit over people's heads, and we need to break it down into smaller information.
And I would encourage the staff to go to the link that actually directs them back to our policy, because it does give them some examples of formative and summative. That was included in our letter that actually brings them directly to the board policy.
I was sent the link too, and told that they can't make sense of the link, again, from a special ed teacher in another district.
Can you
So-
just give an example of besides quizzes, what else is formative?
Again, in formative assessment are quick little check-ins, right? So it could be, you mentioned a quiz, right? But a teacher may do, I'm just going to give an example of a
tickets.
Kahoot, right? Where kids are doing that. It could be that kids are doing just a draft of an essay that they're, grading an essay, and at various points within that final document, they're submitting little pieces of their work, right? We're just checking in on them. And then a summative, like I gave you an example, our science teachers felt labs are actually summative assessment. It wraps up a lot of the learning. So in science classes, a lot of their summative assessments may be the labs that they're doing in their science class, not necessarily just tests, but it could be a lab, all right? In a math class, it could be a little 10-point quiz. It could be an extended response question, one question where we're just checking in to see, did kids master this concept and are able to apply it to a specific, life example within, I would say an extended response is like a multiple step word problem where it's just a quick check-in, and we call those like exemplars. We're asking kids if they can do a multi-step word problem.
Thank you. I think what I'm picking up is that we may be using words that non-educators are not understanding, and that's creating stress. That's been an issue for a long time, using words that non-educators don't understand. So I think that we have some work to do there. that there's room for improvement there. Also, I wonder, I remember hearing the first time that we went through this, that you explained it, which I think it's a good rework. I really do. But that this is also department specific, so it's not
Correct.
the Board of Education and the district office have said, this is the way it is. Each department then
Has
takes
their
what
own
we have and then
opportunity. Yep. And
tweaks
I
it to
actually
their own.
posted that on the website too. So I actually created an Excel sheet for transparency, so every parent can go on to see what does English 11, how are they assessing kids? How are English 12 assessing kids? So even within a department, every course had the opportunity to have a very specific grading policy. So it was the same course within the same department.
So, Trustee Janet.
I think the other concern too was the fact that they take like very short tests. So it's like almost like you got a 10-question test, you get 2 wrong. So I think for a lot of the students there, that was kind of the issue of more of the anxiety that was going on because, you know, they're only taking 10-question test or sometimes a 5-question test. And so as it gets higher, you know, now their grades are going to get lower because, you know, so I think that was their concern for that.
So, trustees, what I hear is an opportunity for us to take the community engagement feedback, which is what it is. They have voiced confusion or being unclear with the new policy, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we clarify. And sometimes that requires multiple discussions to unpack it. We had a similar situation with the Raider Academy. We had to talk about it multiple times in multiple settings in order for everybody to feel comfortable with this process. So what I'm hearing is that we have some more work to do in clarifying. I would ask that you give us an opportunity to take this back as a cabinet, discuss it also with our administrators, and develop a plan whereby our teachers can be very clear.
I was just going to add, and you know, I sat on the committee with you and I did all the work and I could speak about this till I'm blue in the face. But I'm hearing from high school students and high school parents that the teachers are not on board and they're saying that the directors just are telling them what to do. And I keep explaining to people that we had students on the committee, we had teachers on the committee, we've had multiple discussions amongst ourselves. So I don't, again, I think people need very clear, concise information to understand things.
Yeah, and I would say that we have some more work to do with making sure that all of our stakeholders are very clear with the expectation, the intentions, and change takes work. To communicate, it takes time to vet the process and to tweak if necessary. We've been down this road many times when there's something new, but I think that all the feedback is very helpful, and we will take this all back and try to begin to make sure that we dig deep into making sure there's clarifications with our teachers, the delivery with our administrators, how we deliver to the parents so that we can be on board with this. Nobody has done anything wrong. It just takes some time to get accustomed to a new process. So we will work on that, and we will send back, even if it requires us to do some type of session where we speak directly and respond to their questions and talk to them. If you just give us a minute to figure out the best delivery mechanism, we're happy to do that. And so we'll talk offline if that's okay, and bring a plan back to the trustees and the community.
And I think it just to share, myself and Dr. Lucas, as well as Mr. Tulin and members of his staff, we actually met with the high school staff to get some feedback. And we actually followed up. And if you remember, I actually proposed some changes to the original policy based on the feedback that we received from that meeting, and that was embedded in the feedback we got from the high school staff, which really is what impacts the children the most at the high school, right? And I know Dr. Lucas met with the special education even beyond that. So in terms of teachers, we have been listening and having meetings with them and make some significant changes based on the feedback that we're getting from the teachers.
I think what I'm hearing, though, is that although we have placed things on the website and had conversations, things get lost in the sauce sometimes, and not everybody reads what's up on the website. And of those that do read, some have a different take on what they've read, and we need to clarify it. And so, once again, we will do what we need to do and bring back a game plan with a date for which we will outreach to the community and share and make sure that we clarify. That will be forthcoming very soon.
I just want to, I stand behind the policy. I worked on it for 2 years. I understand it. I've spoken to Dr. Dr. Lucas and I were talking about it last Friday night at like 10 o'clock at night about it. And, I mean, it's just dispelling myths and rumors and, so misunderstandings. So,
right.
I
Clarification.
back it and I'm with you guys. I just think there's some stuff out there that we just have to clear up.
Duly noted, and we appreciate the feedback of both the community and the trustees, and we will get right on it. Thank you.
Thank you.